The country is out of money. It has been out of money for years, and yet the lights are still on. The hospitals are running, the military is funded, the pensions are paid on time. Politicians argue on television about new spending plans as if the bank account isn't already empty. This isn't a scandal. It's normal. Right now, most major economies spend more than they collect in taxes. Not occasionally, not during emergencies, consistently. And somehow, the system keeps moving forward. So how do countries spend money they don't have forever? To understand that, we need to abandon the household analogy. Governments love to compare budgets to family finances when it suits them. Tighten your belt, live within your means. It sounds responsible. But countries don't live within their means. They live beyond them, by design. Here's the basic structure. Every year, a government collects revenue: income taxes, corporate taxes, sales taxes, fees. Every year, it spends on healthcare, defense, education, infrastructure, social programs, interest on old debt. If spending exceeds revenue, that's a deficit. If deficits repeat year after year, that becomes national debt. In theory, debt sounds temporary. Borrow now, pay back later. In reality, most governments don't pay it back. They refinance it. When a government bond matures, the Treasury doesn't open a giant savings account and clear the balance. It issues new bonds to pay off the old ones. Old debt is replaced with new debt, continuously. Imagine paying off your credit card by opening another credit card, then repeating that process for decades. That's not a glitch in the system. That is the system. Why does anyone agree to this? Because government debt is considered safe. Investors need somewhere to park trillions of dollars. Pension funds need stable returns. Banks need high-quality collateral. Foreign countries need reserves. Government bonds become the foundation of the global financial system. Debt isn't just a liability. It's someone else's asset. That's why when politicians announce trillions in new borrowing, markets don't automatically panic. There's demand for that debt, sometimes enormous demand. But here's where the quiet math begins. As debt rises, so do interest payments. For years, that wasn't a big problem. After the 2008 financial crisis, central banks slashed interest rates to near zero. Borrowing became extremely cheap. Governments could issue debt at historically low costs. Some even borrowed at negative rates. It felt almost absurd. Countries drowning in debt were paying less interest than ever before. This created a powerful illusion. Maybe debt doesn't really matter. Then inflation returned. In the early 2020s, prices surged globally. Central banks responded the only way they could. They raised interest rates aggressively, and suddenly the cost of servicing old debt began to climb. Here's the uncomfortable part. When rates rise, governments don't just pay more on new borrowing. They eventually pay more on existing debt as it gets rolled over. If a country owes trillions, even a small increase in average interest rates translates into hundreds of billions in extra annual payments. Money that doesn't build anything. Money that doesn't fund innovation. Money that simply services the past. In some large economies, interest payments are now rivaling or exceeding spending on major public programs, and that changes the political equation. Because there are only a few ways out: raise taxes, cut spending, grow the economy fast enough that debt becomes smaller relative to GDP, or inflate the debt away. Each option comes with consequences. Raising taxes slows growth and angers voters. Cutting spending is politically dangerous. High growth is ideal, but increasingly difficult in aging economies. And inflation, while it reduces the real value of debt, erodes purchasing power and public trust. So governments often choose a fifth option. Do nothing dramatic. Keep borrowing. Hope growth stabilizes the ratio. Hope inflation settles. Hope markets remain confident. Confidence is the invisible pillar holding everything up. As long as investors believe a government will honor its obligations, they buy its bonds. As long as bonds are bought, deficits can be financed. But confidence isn't permanent. We've seen what happens when it cracks. Smaller economies have faced debt crises that triggered currency collapses, emergency bailouts, and brutal austerity. Major economies appear more stable for one key reason: they borrow in their own currency. If necessary, their central bank can create money and buy government bonds. This process, known as quantitative easing, became a defining feature after 2008. It was presented as temporary. It lasted more than a decade. Central banks became some of the largest holders of their own government's debt. Think about that for a moment. The institution meant to police inflation ended up financing massive public borrowing. It worked, until inflation forced them to step back. Now we're in unfamiliar territory. Debt levels are historically high relative to GDP in many advanced nations. Populations are aging, which means higher healthcare and pension costs. Geopolitical tensions are increasing defense spending, and interest costs are rising at the same time. The math is tightening, yet political messaging hasn't changed much. Campaigns still promise new programs, infrastructure upgrades, industrial policy, subsidies, tax relief. The future is always presented as affordable. The bill is always deferred. This is the quiet absurdity of modern public finance. No single year breaks the system. There is no dramatic red flashing warning light. There is just a slow reallocation of resources from tomorrow to yesterday. More revenue going to interest, less flexibility during the next crisis, more dependence on stable markets, less room for error. Debt allows countries to smooth shocks, fight wars, survive recessions, build large-scale projects that would be impossible with balanced budgets alone. In that sense, debt is powerful. But permanent deficits are something different. They're a bet that future growth, future taxpayers, and future political stability will be strong enough to support today's promises. It's a rolling wager on tomorrow. And so far, the wager has held. Markets open each morning, bond auctions clear. Investors line up, the system continues. The uncomfortable truth isn't that countries spend money they don't have. It's that they've built an entire global architecture that depends on continuing to do so. The question isn't whether governments can borrow indefinitely. They clearly can, as long as confidence, growth, and monetary control remain intact. The real question is what happens if one of those pillars weakens at the wrong time. Because the system doesn't fail when debt is high. It fails when trust is low. And trust, unlike debt, cannot be rolled over forever.